In the heart of a struggling urban neighborhood, Nyah, a young black woman with dreams as vast as the sky, faces the harsh realities of her world: poverty, prejudice, and the weight of responsibility. What does it take to defy the odds when every step forward feels like a battle? Nyah's journey to the Olympics wasn't just about running. It was about overcoming the unspoken barriers that tried to keep her down. From training on cracked asphalt streets with borrowed shoes to fighting for her place in a world that told her she didn't belong, her determination would soon test its limits. But when everything seemed lost in the most critical moment of her life, would Nyah rise again, or would her dreams slip away forever? Stay tuned to witness a triumph that will leave you inspired and speechless. Before we dive deeper into this gripping story, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, Epic Story Moments, yet, now is the perfect time. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update, and be the first to hear our incredible news stories. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to support more heartwarming tales like this. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Nyah's story began in the heart of a bustling urban neighborhood, a place full of life but rife with challenges. The streets of her childhood were alive with the hum of corner stores, laughter from children playing, and the persistent rumble of passing trains. Yet, beneath the vibrancy lay a deep-seated struggle: poverty, systemic neglect, and the daily grind of survival. For many who lived there, dreams were a luxury they couldn't afford, a sentiment Nyah knew all too well. Nyah was the middle child in a family of 5. Her father, a construction worker, was the backbone of their household until his untimely death in a workplace accident when she was just 10 years old. The tragedy left her mother, a nurse's aide, as the sole provider, working double shifts to keep food on the table and the lights on. The weight of responsibility fell heavily on Nyah, who became a second parent to her 2 younger siblings. She would often help them with homework, cook meals, and even mend their clothes when money was too tight for new ones. Despite the burden she carried, Nyah had a fire inside her, a relentless energy that found its outlet in running. It started as a simple escape, a way to clear her mind when the weight of her responsibilities became too much. "Run like the wind, Nyah," her father used to say when he would take her to the park on his rare days off. Those words stayed with her, becoming a mantra whenever she laced up her shoes and took to the cracked pavement of her neighborhood streets. Her talent was undeniable. By the time she was in middle school, Nyah's speed had caught the attention of her gym teacher, Ms. Carter, who encouraged her to join the track team. "You've got something special, Nyah," Ms. Carter said one afternoon after a practice session. "You could be the best if you work hard." But working hard was only part of the battle. Nyah quickly learned that talent alone wasn't enough to overcome the barriers in her path. Her school had limited resources, with outdated equipment and no proper track for training. Most of her peers came from more privileged backgrounds, with access to private coaching and top-tier gear. Nyah, on the other hand, trained in hand-me-down sneakers that pinch her toes, running on asphalt streets littered with potholes. At home, her family's financial struggles often took precedence over her ambitions. There were times when Nyah skipped meals to ensure her siblings had enough to eat. She declined invitations to weekend track meets because she couldn't afford the bus fare. Still, her dream of one day competing on the world's biggest stage burned brightly. She often stayed up late, watching videos of her idols, Florence Griffith Joyner, Wilma Rudolph, and other trailblazing black athletes, studying their techniques and imagining herself in their shoes. But in her neighborhood, aspirations like hers were often met with skepticism. "The Olympics," neighbors would say with a raised eyebrow. "That's a big dream for someone like you." Even her friends, while supportive, doubted whether she could break free from the cycle of poverty that trapped so many around them. "Maybe it's time to be realistic, Nyah," one of them said during a candid conversation. These comments stung, but they didn't deter her. In fact, they fueled her determination. She worked tirelessly, waking up before dawn to train and using every spare moment to improve. Her coach, Mr. Jenkins, who had retired from professional coaching but volunteered at her school, became her biggest advocate. He would pick her up on his days off, taking her to local tracks or nearby parks where she could practice without distractions. "You've got the heart of a champion," he'd tell her after every grueling session. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." However, systemic barriers constantly loomed over her journey. Sponsors and scholarships often passed her by, favoring athletes from wealthier backgrounds. On one occasion, Nyah applied for a local athletic grant, but was told she didn't meet the criteria, a subtle way of saying she didn't fit the image they wanted to promote. She was reminded at every turn that the world wasn't designed to uplift people like her. The pressure mounted when her family's financial situation worsened. Her mother fell ill, leaving Nyah to juggle school, work, and training while taking care of her siblings. There were moments when she considered giving up, especially after a particularly grueling day when she arrived home to find an eviction notice taped to their door. "Maybe this dream is too big for me," she whispered to herself, tears streaming down her face. But then, she'd think about the little faces of her siblings, looking up to her with hope, and the words of her father, "Run like the wind, Nyah," echoing in her heart. She couldn't give up. Not now, not ever. Her breakthrough came during her senior year of high school when she qualified for the state championships. It was a defining moment, one that silenced the naysayers and validated all her sacrifices. Nyah dominated the track, her sheer determination and raw talent propelling her to victory. Reporters took notice, dubbing her the girl who outran her circumstances. The win earned her a small scholarship to a community college, where she continued to train under Mr. Jenkins' guidance. Every step forward felt like a battle won, but Nyah knew the ultimate war lay ahead. Qualifying for the Olympics, her journey was far from over. The challenges would only grow, but so would her resolve. With every stride she took, Nyah carried the weight of her family, her community, and countless others who saw themselves in her. She wasn't just running for gold. She was running for everyone who had ever been told their dreams were impossible. And for Nyah, impossible was just another word for not yet. Nyah's journey to qualify for the Olympics was marked by relentless hard work, heartbreaking sacrifices, and a determination that seemed to defy the very forces working against her. Each day began before the sun rose, the soft glow of streetlights illuminating her solitary figure as she ran along the cracked asphalt streets of her neighborhood. Her breath visible in the chilly morning air, she pushed herself harder with every stride, her heart pounding with both exhaustion and resolve. Her shoes, a pair of hand-me-downs from her coach, Mr. Jenkins, were worn thin at the soles, offering little protection against the unforgiving pavement. "We'll get you some proper gear one day," Mr. Jenkins had promised, but Nyah knew better than to hope for luxuries. Resources were scarce, and every dollar she earned from her part-time job as a grocery store cashier went toward supporting her family. Despite these challenges, Nyah threw herself into her training with unyielding focus. She spent hours perfecting her form, timing her sprints, and studying videos of Olympic runners to improve her technique. Her training sessions were a mix of grueling physical effort and mental fortitude. When the local track was occupied or closed, she ran on uneven sidewalks or through empty parking lots, dodging potholes and cracks that threatened to trip her up. The sacrifices extended far beyond her training. Nyah often skipped meals to ensure her younger siblings had enough to eat, her stomach growling as she powered through long runs. Social outings and personal time became distant memories. Invitations to parties or gatherings were met with polite declines, her focus unwavering. "I'll catch up with you guys after the Olympics," she joked to her friends, though deep down, she knew some relationships might never recover from her absence. But the hardest sacrifices were the emotional ones. Nyah's mother, worn down by years of struggle and illness, had become a shadow of the vibrant woman she once was. Watching her mother's health deteriorate while balancing the weight of her family's needs left Nyah teetering on the edge of burnout. She questioned herself constantly. Was this dream worth the cost? The outside world wasn't much kinder. Potential sponsors and donors often turned her away, citing flimsy reasons that barely concealed their biases. "You've got talent, no doubt about that," one local businessman had said after a meeting. "But we're looking for someone with a more polished image." Nyah had walked out of that office feeling a mixture of anger and humiliation. Things reached a breaking point during a regional qualifying meet. Nyah had been performing well, consistently finishing at the top of her heats. But during the semifinals, a rival runner deliberately elbowed her during a turn, causing her to stumble and lose precious seconds. Though she managed to finish the race, her time wasn't fast enough to advance. As she sat alone on the sidelines, tears streaming down her face, she felt the crushing weight of defeat. For the first time, Nyah seriously considered quitting. The sacrifices, the rejections, the physical pain, it all seemed too much. She couldn't shake the image of her family struggling at home while she chased a dream that seemed increasingly out of reach. Maybe everyone's right, she thought bitterly. Maybe this is impossible. It was her grandmother, however, who pulled her back from the brink. After the race, Nyah went to visit her in the hospital. Her grandmother, frail but still sharp as ever, took one look at Nyah's tear-streaked face and knew something was wrong. "Sit down, baby," she said, patting the edge of her hospital bed. Nyah poured out her heart, confessing her doubts and frustrations. "I'm tired, Grandma," she said, her voice breaking. "No matter how hard I try, it feels like the world is stacked against me. I don't know if I can do this anymore." Her grandmother listened patiently, nodding as Nyah spoke. When she finally responded, her voice was firm yet gentle. "Nyah, do you remember the story I used to tell you about the river?" Nyah nodded. It was a story she'd heard countless times as a child, about a river that carved through a mountain, not by force, but by persistence. That river didn't stop flowing just because a mountain was in its way. Her grandmother continued. It kept going little by little until it made a path. That's what you're doing, Nyah. Every step you take, every race you run, you're carving your path. And one day, you're going to break through that mountain, and no one will be able to stop you. Her grandmother's words reignited the fire in her heart. Nyah left the hospital with a renewed sense of purpose. The next morning, she was back on the streets, running before the sun came up. Every step felt like a defiance of the obstacles in her way. Her hard work began to pay off. At her next meet, Nyah shattered her personal record, earning her a spot in the state championships. The victory was bittersweet. She knew it was only one step on a much longer journey, but it was enough to keep her going. Through every rejection and setback, Nyah clung to her grandmother's words. She trained harder, pushing her limits and finding creative ways to overcome her lack of resources. She watched YouTube videos to learn strength training exercises she could do at home. She ran sprints in the rain, her clothes soaked and her shoes squelching with every step. And when her coach surprised her with a second-hand pair of high-quality running shoes, she cried tears of gratitude, knowing they represented more than just equipment. They were a symbol of belief in her potential. Nyah's determination began to catch the attention of local reporters and community leaders. Small articles appeared in the local paper, highlighting her grit and perseverance. A video of her training on the cracked streets of her neighborhood went viral, earning her a small but growing group of supporters who saw in her the embodiment of resilience and hope. But Nyah knew that her biggest challenges were still ahead. Qualifying for the Olympics would require more than just physical strength. It would demand every ounce of her mental and emotional fortitude. And as she stood at the starting line of the state championships, with her family and coach cheering from the sidelines, she made a silent vow. No matter how difficult the journey, she would keep carving her path, just like the river in her grandmother's story. She was no longer running just for herself. She was running for her family, her community, and everyone who had ever been told their dreams were impossible. Nyah's journey to the Olympics was a testament to her resilience, but the final race of the 400-meter event was where her spirit would truly be tested. After years of sacrifice, Countless grueling hours of training and an unwavering belief in her dream, Nyah found herself standing on the grandest stage in sports. The Olympics were everything she had imagined and more. A blend of dazzling lights, roaring crowds, and an overwhelming sense of unity as athletes from around the globe gathered to showcase their talent. For Nyah, the opening ceremony had been an emotional moment, draped in her country's flag. She had marched with her fellow athletes, her heart swelling with pride. But more than representing her nation, Nyah knew she was carrying the hopes and dreams of her community, her family, and every young girl who had been told her dreams were out of reach. The day of the 400-meter final arrived with a tense atmosphere. The stadium was packed with thousands of spectators, and millions more were watching from home. Nyah's nerves were on edge as she walked onto the track. The heat of the day radiated off the ground, and the cacophony of cheers and chants echoed in her ears. She focused on her breathing, replaying her grandmother's words in her mind. Asterisk, every step you take is carving your path. Keep going, baby. Asterisk, her competitors were seasoned athletes, many of whom had access to resources and training facilities Nyah could only dream of. But she wasn't intimidated. She had trained for this moment with everything she had, and she was determined to give it her all. As the runners lined up at the starting blocks, the tension was palpable. Nyah bent down, positioning herself for the start, her fingers gripping the ground as she steadied her breathing. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing on her shoulders, but she channeled it into focus. The starter raised the gun. On your marks. Set. The crack of the starting pistol sliced through the air, and the runners exploded off the blocks. Nyah's heart pounded as she surged forward, her legs pumping with a rhythm she had perfected over years of relentless training. The first 200 meters were a blur. Nyah maintained a steady pace, staying in the middle of the pack. She knew the race would be decided in the final stretch, where endurance and strategy mattered most. But as they rounded the last curve, disaster struck. One of her competitors, running in the lane beside her, suddenly veered into her path. Whether it was an accident or a deliberate move born of desperation, Nyah couldn't say, but the result was devastating. The other runner's elbow caught Nyah's arm, and the collision sent her stumbling. Her foot caught on the edge of the track, and before she could recover, she fell hard onto the ground. The crowd gasped in unison, the sound like a wave of shock rippling through the stadium. Nyah's body hit the track with a sickening thud, her palms scraping against the rough surface. Pain shot through her knees and elbows, but it was nothing compared to the anguish that gripped her heart. For a split second, the world seemed to stand still. The other runners surged ahead, their figures growing smaller as they raced toward the finish line. Nyah lay on the track, stunned, her dreams slipping away with every passing second. But then, something inside her ignited, a fire that refused to be extinguished. Images of her grandmother, her family, and her community flashed through her mind. She thought of the sacrifices she had made, the countless mornings spent training on cracked asphalt, the rejections and the pain. She couldn't let it end like this. With a grit born of sheer determination, Nyah pushed herself up. Her knees wobbled as she stood, and the pain was excruciating, but she blocked it out. The finish line was still in sight, and the race wasn't over. The crowd roared as they realized what was happening. Nyah, despite the fall, had started running again. Her legs burned with effort, and her heart felt like it might burst, but she gave it everything she had. Each step was a battle, every stride an act of defiance against the odds. The gap between her and the other runners seemed insurmountable. But Nyah ran with a speed and determination that left the commentators and spectators stunned. The stadium erupted into cheers, the crowd rising to their feet as they witnessed her extraordinary comeback. With every stride, Nyah closed the gap. By the time she reached the final stretch, she had overtaken one runner, then another. The roar of the crowd grew deafening as she powered through, her body moving as though fueled by an unbreakable will. In the final meters, Nyah found herself neck and neck with the frontrunner. The finish line was just ahead, and every ounce of energy she had left went into that last sprint. Time seemed to slow as the two runners crossed the line, their bodies lunging forward in a desperate bid for victory. When Nyah collapsed onto the ground after crossing the finish line, she wasn't sure what had just happened. Her chest heaved as she gasped for air, her vision blurred by sweat and tears. The crowd was screaming, but she couldn't make out the words. Moments later, the scoreboard lit up, and the results were announced. Nyah had done it by a fraction of a second. She had claimed the gold medal. The stadium erupted into thunderous applause, and Nyah's name was chanted by thousands of voices. She sat up slowly, her body aching but her heart soaring. Tears streamed down her face as she looked around, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she had just accomplished. Her victory was more than just a personal triumph. It was a statement to the world. Nyah had shown that no obstacle, whether systemic, personal, or physical, could keep her from achieving her dream. As she stood on the podium later that evening, the gold medal gleaming around her neck, Nyah felt a surge of pride and gratitude. The anthem played, and she held her head high, tears streaming as she thought of everyone who had supported her along the way. In that moment, she wasn't just Nyah, the girl from the cracked asphalt streets. She was a symbol of resilience, hope, and the unbreakable spirit of those who dare to dream. And as the world watched her stand tall, many were inspired to believe that they, too, could overcome the odds. Nyah's body trembled as she collapsed just beyond the finish line, her chest heaving as she gasped for air. The roar of the crowd was deafening, but she could barely process it through the overwhelming emotions surging within her. Her legs felt like they had turned to lead, every muscle in her body burning from the monumental effort she had just exerted. Yet, in that moment of exhaustion, a single, powerful thought pushed its way to the forefront. She had finished the race. For a few agonizing moments, Nyah lay there on the track, uncertain of the outcome. She had given it everything, every ounce of energy, every shred of willpower, and yet the result was out of her hands. Around her, other athletes were being helped up, some congratulating each other, others nursing their own disappointments. But Nyah stayed where she was, her heart pounding not just from the physical exertion, but from the unbearable anticipation. Then it happened. The scoreboard lit up, and the stadium fell silent for a split second before erupting into cheers so loud they seemed to shake the very ground. Nyah's name flashed across the screen in bold letters, and beside it, the number 1. She had done it. By a fraction of a second, she had crossed the line first, securing the gold medal. The realization hit her like a wave, and tears poured freely down her face. She had won. Against all odds, despite the fall, despite the pain, she had claimed victory on the biggest stage in the world. The weight of the moment was almost too much to bear. A group of medics approached her, offering assistance, but Nyah waved them off with a shaky smile. Slowly, she pushed herself up, leaning on one of the officials for support as the crowd continued to cheer her name. Cameras zoomed in on her tear-streaked face, capturing the raw emotion of the moment. Across the globe, millions watched in awe as the young woman who had stumbled quite literally had risen to become a champion. As she stood upright, her vision blurred by tears, Nyah spotted her coach running toward her. He was shouting something, but the words were lost in the cacophony of noise. When he finally reached her, he pulled her into a tight embrace, his own eyes glistening with tears. "You did it, Nyah," he choked out. "You did it." The victory lap was unlike anything Nyah had ever experienced. With the flag of her country draped around her shoulders, she jogged slowly around the track, waving to the crowd as chants of her name echoed through the stadium. Fans from all nations rose to their feet, applauding not just her skill, but her incredible resilience and determination. When the time came for the medal ceremony, Nyah's heart swelled with pride. Standing on the top podium, the gold medal placed gently around her neck, she looked out at the sea of faces. The anthem played, and she closed her eyes, letting the moment sink in. This wasn't just a personal victory. It was a triumph for her family, her community, and every person who had ever been told their dreams were impossible. As the anthem ended, Nyah reached for the microphone offered to her. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted it, her voice cracking with emotion as she began to speak. "This medal," she said, holding it up for the crowd to see, "isn't just for me. It's for my family, for my community, and for every single person who has been told they can't. I stand here today because of the people who believed in me, even when the world didn't. And most of all, I dedicate this to my grandmother, who always told me I was destined for greatness." The mention of her grandmother brought fresh tears to her eyes. She paused, taking a deep breath as the crowd fell silent in reverence. "She's not here to see this, but I know she's watching. Every step I took on this track today, I took for her, and I hope I've made her proud." The crowd erupted into applause, many moved to tears by her heartfelt words. Across social media, the moment was being shared and celebrated in real time. Videos of her speech, her triumphant race, and her emotional finish were trending worldwide, with captions that highlighted her strength and perseverance. The days following Nyah's victory were a whirlwind. She became an instant global icon, her story of resilience and triumph inspiring millions. Media outlets clamored for interviews, and her face graced the covers of magazines and newspapers around the world. But more than the fame, it was the impact of her story that mattered most to Nyah. Letters and messages poured in from people who had been moved by her journey. A young girl from her neighborhood wrote to say that Nyah's victory had inspired her to take up running, despite the naysayers who told her she would never succeed. A man from another country shared how Nyah's story had given him the courage to pursue his own dreams, despite facing obstacles of his own. Nyah didn't just win a race. She sparked a movement. Her triumph became a symbol of hope and possibility, a reminder that even in the face of insurmountable odds, determination and grit could lead to greatness. Back home, her return was met with a hero's welcome. Her community organized a parade in her honor, the streets lined with people cheering and waving signs that read, "Nyah, our champion, and dreams do come true." As her car rolled through the crowd, Nyah waved and smiled, overwhelmed by the love and support she had received. But even in the midst of the celebrations, Nyah remained grounded. She knew her journey wasn't over. Inspired by her own struggles, she announced plans to create a foundation dedicated to providing resources and opportunities for underprivileged athletes. No one should have to choose between their dreams and their circumstances, she said during the launch event. "I want to make sure the next generation of athletes has the support they need to succeed." In the end, Nyah's story was about more than just a race. It was a story of resilience, community, and the unyielding power of belief. And as she continued to inspire others with her actions, she knew her grandmother's words would forever guide her. Asterisk, every step you take is carving your path. Keep going. Asterisk. Nyah stood on the podium, the gold medal gleaming against her chest, the weight of it not just physical but symbolic. She gripped the microphone tightly, her knuckles white, as she scanned the massive crowd before her. Her voice was steady, but the emotion was palpable as she began her speech. "This medal," she said, holding it up for the crowd to see, "isn't just for me. It represents every person who has ever been told their dreams are too big, their circumstances too small, or their place in this world predefined." Her voice cracked slightly, but she took a deep breath and continued. "I stand here today not as one individual, but as the embodiment of a collective dream. A dream shared by countless young girls from neighborhoods like mine, who are told to keep their ambitions realistic." The crowd erupted in applause, but Nyah wasn't finished. "I'm here to tell you that realistic is just another word for limitations others impose on us. I've faced systemic barriers, personal heartbreak, and countless moments when giving up seemed easier than pushing forward. But I refuse to stop, and I'm standing here because of that refusal." Her words resonated not only in the stadium, but across television screens, phones, and laptops worldwide. The live stream of her victory speech was being shared at an unprecedented rate, with millions commenting on how her words had touched their hearts. Nyah shifted the focus to her journey. "I was lucky to have people who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. My grandmother, who passed before she could see this day, always told me, "Nyah, your path is yours to carve." I carried her words with me through every race, every stumble, and every doubt. She paused, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "And this medal? It's for her. It's for every person who whispered encouragement when I felt unheard. It's for my community, who showed me that even in struggle, there is strength." The audience, both in the stadium and online, listened with rapt attention as she transitioned into a broader message. "Representation matters," she said, her voice rising with conviction. "When young girls see someone who looks like them standing here, they realize that they too belong on this stage. When we break barriers, we don't just climb for ourselves. We leave the ladder for others to follow." The applause was thunderous. But Nyah wasn't done yet. She leaned into the microphone, her tone shifting to one of determination. "I want to challenge everyone watching this. Let's not stop here. Let's invest in communities that have been overlooked for too long. Let's create spaces where talent isn't overshadowed by lack of resources. Let's dismantle the stereotypes that hold people back." The impact of her words was immediate. Social media was ablaze with hashtags like #NyahInspires, #BreakingBarriers, and #DreamBig, as people shared clips of her speech along with their own stories of overcoming obstacles. Corporate sponsors began pledging funds to programs for underprivileged youth. Organizations that had once rejected Nyah now reached out, eager to support the causes she championed. Within weeks, a wave of change began to ripple across the world. Inspired by Nyah's victory, governments and private organizations alike started initiatives to provide better facilities and training for young athletes in underserved communities. Scholarships were established in Nyah's name, offering opportunities to young girls who dreamed of excelling in sports but lacked the resources to do so. Nyah herself didn't stop with the speech. She returned home to a hero's welcome. The streets lined with people holding signs that read "Nyah, our champion and dream big." But rather than bask in the glory, she got to work. She launched the Nyah Foundation, an organization dedicated to empowering young athletes from marginalized backgrounds. The foundation provided training programs, mentorship, and financial assistance, ensuring that no child would have to choose between their passion and their circumstances. Through the foundation, Nyah traveled to schools and community centers, sharing her story with young athletes. She spoke candidly about the struggles she faced, the times she wanted to give up, and the moments that reignited her determination. "Your dreams," she told them, "are worth fighting for. And when you fight, you're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for everyone who comes after you." Her impact wasn't limited to the athletic world. Nyah became a global ambassador for equality and representation, using her platform to address broader societal issues. She collaborated with other activists and organizations, advocating for systemic changes that would create more opportunities for underprivileged communities. In sports, her legacy challenged long-standing stereotypes. She proved that athletic excellence was not limited by race, background, or socioeconomic status. Young athletes from similar circumstances found new confidence in pursuing their dreams, often citing Nyah as their inspiration. One particularly poignant moment came a year after her Olympic victory. During a school visit, a young girl approached her, clutching a makeshift medal made from cardboard and foil. With tears in her eyes, the girl said, "I want to be like you one day." Nyah knelt down, her own eyes brimming with emotion, and replied, "You don't have to be like me. You can be greater." As the years passed, Nyah's influence only grew. She was invited to speak at global conferences, her words inspiring leaders to take actionable steps toward equity and inclusion. Her story was adapted into books and documentaries, ensuring that her message reached even those who hadn't witnessed her historic race. Nyah's triumph became a beacon of hope for generations. It reminded people that even the most insurmountable odds could be overcome with determination, resilience, and the support of a community. Her story wasn't just about winning a gold medal. It was about breaking chains, building bridges, and carving paths for others to follow. In her final public speech before stepping back from the limelight to focus on her foundation, Nyah summed up her journey with the words that had carried her through every challenge. Every step we take matters, not just for us, but for everyone who walks after us. So, take your steps boldly, dream without limits, and never stop believing in the power of what you can achieve. Her legacy lived on, not just in the hearts of those she inspired, but in the tangible changes she sparked, proving that one person's determination could indeed change the world.